you got to figure it out, right? And so I don't know if I went on from a tangent or not, but I just take that really seriously, that we can't expect to see all the winners when we haven't done the job of becoming a better investor.
You're listening to Ice Cream with Investors, a podcast that is dedicated to teaching you how to better invest your money so that you can live a more intentional life. I'm your host, Matt Four, and it is my goal to teach and empower you to remove the roadblocks to your financial success.
All right, Joey, welcome to the show.
Matt, so good to be with you again, man. I love it.
Absolutely. Well, you know, we like to start with the difficult questions here. What's your favorite ice cream?
I got to tell you, our family's like on this no dairy kick right now, because it's just really like our bodies just don't do well with it. And so we get the dairy-free chocolate cookies and cream. It's made with cashew milk, and it is amazing.
Is that something you get at the grocery store?
Yes.
What's the brand? That's not Halo Top, is it?
No, it's called So Delicious.
Okay. Yeah,
check it out, bro. It's good.
The older I get, the more dairy kind of upsets my stomach too. Still doesn't stop me from making bad decisions and eating ice cream whenever I want. But my wife got this cookie dough that's cashew. The base of it's cashew, but oh my gosh, like it says that you're supposed to cook that and make it into cookies. We just eat spoonfuls on a Sunday while we're watching, binge watching our shows. So it's phenomenal.
I love it.
Well, tell our listeners, what's the scoop? What do you do today?
So run the community Wealth Without Wall Street, the podcast you may have heard. And we're all about helping people get to financial freedom as fast as possible. For those that want to get there, we have kind of cracked the code, if you will. And looking back over what took us 10 plus years, we want to help people get there in half the time or less, just by following a process and knowing like some shortcuts along the way.
Yeah, it's usually about discipline more than anything. So I love that you guys have a process. When I was first getting involved in this space, it was a lot of like, what's your income, what's your expenses, your ability to save the rest will change whether you're going to be wealthy or not. And then my mind got flipped onto this idea of, well, if we're stuffing money in a ground and hoping that we can pull more out of it later, just for this idea of cash flow, why not build that cash flow today? And one of the things I love about what you all do is you do everything. I mean, I've seen e-commerce unicorn businesses to land flipping to, I think you guys had a short-term Airbnb business for a while. But talk to us, what is that process? And we'll kind of go and build off of that process from there.
Well, we wrote a book on it, and so if you like audiobooks, regular books on Amazon, it's called The 3 Steps to Freedom. It's Wealth Without Wall Street's the title, but The 3 Steps to Freedom Through Passive Income. And I always break it down very simply. It's just the GPS model, right? So you have a destination in mind. You have a place where you're at right now. A GPS, if you can enter in where you're at and where you're headed, it can tell you what to do, like what the next turn is, right, left, go straight, whatever the case is. And we break the GPS into goal, plan, and support. And under each one of those, you have various things that will help you get there faster. And so I'm happy to dive into all that. But those are those 3 steps that we've identified, just looking backwards and saying, what did we do that went well? What did we do that didn't go so well that we would have done differently today, and help people then learn from it? And I always say, like, try to pay wholesale for the thing instead of paying retail like we did, learning the hard way.
I love it. I do want to go through goal plan support, but before we get there, you mentioned GPS, and my mind immediately goes to the Michael Scott Office episode where he blindly follows the GPS into the lake. And now that was 2002 technology, so I think we're a lot more advanced now, but that's where my mind went.
That's awesome.
So talk to us about goals. So I do think, like, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. Sometimes it's a longer path if you don't have some sort of specific vision in mind. And whenever I'm talking to people about like, hey, what is your monthly income goal that you're looking for? It's obviously $10,000. There's no other number that ever gets thrown around besides $10,000 a month. But how do you help people kind of craft that vision and think about what their goals are?
Well, we just go back to the basics, right? I think most people, if they're in their 30s, 40s, even 50s, they've really quit dreaming about what life could be, and they've just kept putting up with what life is. And so what we do is we actually have, we call it the Passport Challenge. We put people through, it's a free course in our community. There's almost 8,500 people that have gone through this, and it is literally a way to help you dream again. It's to say, man, if I were financially free today, what would that look like? Who would I be? What would I do? And what would I have? So the be, do, have, you've probably heard it in other circles. But to me, it helps to put some clothes on this idea of financial freedom, because if I say, hey, Matt, what do you want to do if you're financially free? Well, you may have something completely different in mind that may not even require nearly as much as I would need in terms of what my finances are. But the whole main concept is, if I can get excited about that end result, right, the destination, then it like behooves me to start making decisions that support it, and to stop doing things that don't support that. And what do I mean by that is, I can then start to say, like, instead of somebody coming to you and say, hey, Matt, you know what, you're just not really being good with your money if you have a latte every day. Well, is that really going to encourage you? Or if you see that the end result is something you're so excited about, like, I really want to spend more time with my family. I'm going to be working 2 or 3 hours a week in terms of just managing some multiple businesses that run without me. And I want to be able to really invest in my kids' education. I want them to be entrepreneurs. I want their spouses to be in business with me. Like, these are the pictures that I have in terms of my vision board, right? I got 5 daughters. So I'm thinking, I want to be in business with my son-in-laws. And what does that look like? What am I going to have to do to put myself in position for that to be true? Well, I can't be working 60 hours a week in a 9 to 5 and hope that I have time to make that happen. I've got to every year be shaving off hours of active business and switching that over into income that works without me, right? And so anyways, once you know what that vision looks like, you start to say, my passive income has to exceed my monthly expenses. That's it. I don't have to have some like ridiculous, number in a Charles Schwab account that will hopefully kick off enough money for me to live on when I'm 65. Nobody's excited about that, by the way. That is not real living. That's just what people have said we should expect. But if it means I want to be able to pick my kids up from school every day and be able to drop them off every morning, like that, like Rick in our community, that was literally one of his goals. And then literally 9 months later, he was doing that. And we interviewed him, and he was like, this is the best thing in the world, is I get to eat breakfast with my son every morning. And he's like, and I know the value of that. And you can't convince me that it's not worth all the steps I took to get here. So I'm probably rambling a little bit, but ultimately, if you get clear on that goal and you know that your passive income has to exceed your monthly expenses, now you can start building the plan. That's where the G is kind of checked off. And we get into that plan setting where you start making decisions that support it.
What I hear you talking about when you're talking about that is, more importantly, knowing what to say yes to and what to say no to. I always say, if it's not a hell yes or hell no, if it's a maybe, then that's the worst spot to be in. And I read this quote the other day. It was something around like, knowing which hill to climb is better and more important than how fast you can climb the hill. Because there's a lot of people in life that spend a lot of time and effort climbing the wrong hill, only to get to the top of that and look over and say, wait a minute, that wasn't even the right hill to be on.
And by the way, great quote that says, that supports this idea that, man, who are the mentors that are in your life? Who are the people that you're getting information from? Do they support what your end goal is? Or are they just successful in their own right? Because guess what? I love Grant Cardone. I think the guy is brilliant. He's way more successful than I would ever consider to be. He's way more famous, but I don't necessarily like the end result of what his life looks like. Mine is much more personal. I don't want to be out in the middle in front of everybody. I don't want any part of that. But so who are the mentors, and have they been where you want to be? because you have to choose that. That's the hill that you're, in my mind, when you say that, that's the hill that I want to climb. And I want to get really clear on that because, like you said, I don't want to go climb 4 or 5 and then find out I was in the wrong place.
I think you're being modest. I've been with you in Birmingham where the paparazzi chases you down the street.
Not
I'm
yet,
kidding.
not ever, hopefully.
So once we have that goal in mind, then how do you think about and how do you educate around building that plan? Because when I got involved in this whole passive income journey and investing, I mean, dude, the options are limitless and they
Yeah.
all work, right? Whether you want to flip land or sell unicorns on an e-commerce store or mine Bitcoin, it all worked for somebody in the past. And if you put your mind to it, chances are it could work for you as well. But what you can't do is get distracted and go down one path and then say, wait a minute, I want to be on another, and then say that you want to be on another. So how do you help people kind of clarify what their plan should look like?
Yeah. Well, two things. Number one, it always starts with cash flow. So I have to support my end result, my end goal with where do I store money today? Right? So if I say I want to be free in the next 5 years, then I immediately, and let's say you're 35, let's say you're 55, you immediately say, I'm not going to continue to put money into any qualified plan because each one of those qualified plans requires me to put money in and not touch it until some way down the road time frame. And I just can't afford to put money there. I don't care, Matt, if you try to convince me that, man, the rate of return in my 401k was up 15% last year. I really don't care because it's not real numbers that I can actually pay the bills with today. And the only way I'm keeping score is if my passive income exceeds my monthly expenses. And your 401k, my 401k, whatever those things are, they don't kick off cash flow today. So they immediately are out. I'm not saying you go and dump everything out of your 401k or your qualified plans, but you definitely don't continue to contribute to them because now that money is money I can't use to build the passive income. You start thinking about debts differently, right? If you say, man, people have always told me I just have to be debt free. If I just do that, then I'll be financially free. And those things are not congruent because let's think about it for a second. In the last 3 years, this is really one of the best things that I can take from the last 3 years is the cost of living doesn't go away. It only goes up, by the way, because of inflation. So what cost you, $200 a month for your power bill or for $100 for your water bill 3 years ago is now, $200 for your water bill, whatever the case is for you. Those things don't go away. They just go up. So if I'm completely debt free, I still have insurance, I still have taxes, I still have gas, I still have all these expenses that will never go away, medical expenses. So getting to financial freedom, I have to not only pay off debt, which is part of the process, I also need to be building passive income. And most people, if you ever think about the game Cash Flow by Robert Kiyosaki, if you ever played that game, I've never played the game where someone gets free and wins the game by paying off debt as their strategy. It's always the guy that goes after building passive income because many, many times, if I can invest on that side of the equation, the monthly expenses can still be there, but I'll eclipse them much faster by investing in assets that produce that passive income. And then the second piece, so cash flow is number one, where that cash is going. Number two is what sort of investor are you? Because most people think, well, you just invest in things because they have rate of return. And it's just very linear. It's like, oh, well, this one gets 12%, this one gets 8%. I'll just go with the 12%. But the fact is that, Matt, the way God designed you and the way God designed me are very different, right? We see the world differently. We have different resources available to us. We have different experiences and skill sets. And all of those things play into how we see certain investments. And what I would tell you is that somebody could be investing in a single family rental and be perfectly aligned with that. And they should just keep stacking and keep going down that path. But then there's somebody like, for instance, Russ, my business partner, he invested in a single family real estate deal 15, 20 years ago, and he got bored because there's nothing he could influence. Like, he's an influencer. He wants to be a part of the deal and, have some sort of activity involved, at least advisory. And he got none of that. And so he was like, if this is how this investing deal is, I don't want any part of it. This is boring. And so my point is, man, don't focus on the investment as much as it is who you are. And that's why we do our whole process we call the investor DNA. That, man, if you download our ebook, you actually get free access to that. So take that, and it'll give you about the top 15 passive income streams that we've interviewed people or been involved with ourselves. And it helps you to kind of filter through them and say, well, hey, this is how I see the world. I would really like this about land flipping, or I don't know if I'd like this about short-term rentals. And it would give you all those details so that you can make a decision on where you should focus your attention.
Yeah, and it's important anytime you're talking about personal finance that you realize it is personal, right? There's a math side of personal finance that says we can squeeze out extra bips, extra percentage points, and extra tax dollars or tax savings this way. And then there's the emotion side that says, yeah, but I like to sleep at night and I don't want to worry about my money and things like that. And so we were laughing beforehand, boy, those people that invested in Bitcoin back in 2017 looked like they were crazy. And then it turns out they weren't. And then back in 2022, they were crazy again because it had fallen off a cliff, only for it to be ripping at 92,000 as we're recording this and be smart again. If you can't handle that choppiness of the emotional side, then it's not your, to borrow your term, investor DNA to go do that, even though it might produce an outsized return.
That's right. And the other thing I would say is you have to be clear about your buy box, right? So for instance, Bitcoin is a great example. People get caught up in the hype of, man, this is exciting, right? Like the way that these things swing up and down. Like, I could have a big win if I bought here, buy low, and sell high. But it's just like playing the market, right? If that's your strategy with Bitcoin, is you're literally buying, and it's all about your buying and selling strategy. And that is not a way to cash flow, right? That is an appreciation or like an accumulation kind of strategy. But if you're trying to play score the way we talked about, where my passive income exceeds my monthly expenses, buying and selling a Bitcoin or any of these cryptos is really not it's not conducive to that process, because you're actively having to manage that on a day in day basis to make sure that that's producing some sort of a return, and it's not actually passive and it's not consistent. So I'll tell you, when we invested in Bitcoin, if you ever listen to our podcast, we do our passive income report. We've actually done it on the mining side, and we've done it because we didn't do it for passive income as much as we wanted to have a storehouse for alternative asset class or currency, if you will. Mm-hmm. And so we do report it because there's some element that you could trade that for in dollars today, but it's ultimately, we would never say that should be like your first step into being a passive income investor, because it's just really not the ideal way to do that or to create that. There's a million other ways.
Out of curiosity, what is your buy box or investor DNA? Can you talk about yours specifically? I'll give you my buy box afterwards.
Yeah. So if you think about the what we based it off of is the DISC profile. Are you familiar with that?
Mm-hmm. I am.
So the D, I, S, and C profiles. I'm an S profile. That means I'm much more like, I'm steady, I'm loyal, I like working on teams. I don't like being like the center of attention. I don't like being like the driver of the relationship or of the, of the deal. And so I'm much more interested in things that are kind of known. So like private lending, for instance, really lines up with me. One, I was also a mortgage loan officer years ago, so I kind of think that way anyway. It's kind of like, I understand how to underwrite a deal pretty easily. And I like the private lending because there's always something collateralized behind that deal. That if something goes really bad, I have something to fall back on. Another thing that lines up with me is like syndications. So having a really strong operator that I believe in, that has a great track record in an asset class, I feel really good allowing that person to kind of run point and make those dollars work for me, and to produce an ongoing monthly cash flow, because that's really in my buy box. If it doesn't produce a cash flow for 2 years, like there's certain deals that I think are going to be great in the car wash space, or in the self storage space even. But a lot of those, when they're building ground up, you have to factor in that there's going to be 18 to 24 months where there's no cash flow. And I just don't have that in my buy box. I want something to produce in the first 6 months or less, because I want to be able to see how I'm keeping score with passive income exceeding monthly expenses. Um, we invest a lot in raw land in our land business that we do with the landgeek.com. If you ever aren't familiar with that process, we buy it at 20 to 30 cents on the dollar, and we turn around and flip it to retail buyers, but we own or finance that land, so it produces a note income to us. And we just do that over and over and over again, and it keeps stacking. That one business for us produces over 32,000 a month, and because we've been doing it for over 4 years now. But those are the primary things that really like line up with me. But yeah, it really just depends. Like on the disc profile, which is yours?
I'm probably more of an I than anything, or I'm sorry, a D than anything, a driver.
Okay.
I have a little bit of alpha and impatience behind me, but I think we're aligned on our investor buy box in the sense of I think my buy box is I need it to cash flow. I need it to have proof that it will appreciate faster than inflation over time and have some sort of native tax advantage to it. That's
Yeah,
how I've
it's
narrowed it
perfect.
down. And that's helped me say no to VC deals or angel deals before even having to go through the underwriting piece, or to
Yeah.
be a private lender in a business acquisition or something like that. I love debt funds. I love private lending just because of the steady nature of it and consistent cash flow. And as you mentioned, the collateral behind it always gives you that safeguard. But really, when I started narrowing my buy box to cash flow, appreciate more than inflation over time, and it's got to offer some sort of native tax advantage to it, that helped me say no to a lot of deals that I was spending Saturday mornings, Sunday mornings trying to underwrite and bang my head against the wall.
What a great takeaway, by the way. If you're just heard Matt, is so important to, if you don't define your buy box, everything is a good deal.
That's
And
right.
you look up and you're like, why did I do that deal 3 years in, or 2 years in, or 6 months in? And you realize I just got caught up in the hype, because
That's right.
guess what? There's no pro forma that looks bad. They all look good, but it doesn't, if you didn't define what success was, it really, you can get, like you said, on the wrong hill and looking like, oh man, I need to go back over there. That's what I was really looking for. So anyways, man, just don't miss what Matt just said there. That was really good.
The thing I've learned the most over the past 4 years is that no pro forma lasts past day one. Meaning the day after you acquire something, whether it's a business, real estate, or any sort of projection, is always going to be wrong after day one. So knowing and being more skeptical and always asking, why does this deal not make sense, will help you weed through a lot of the stuff that, oh, wow, you've got a 15% rent growth assumption for the next 5 years. That seems a little off.
Yeah, when does that happen before? Like, show me historically where you've done that. So yeah, you have the ability to really be critical in the process. So and I'll say this, Matt's making a good point. The more reps you have, the easier those things are to spot. The first few, you don't really know what you're looking at, but it just sounds good. And so
Yep.
the more you can do some of these things we've been talking about today, and know yourself, know your buy box, and be thinking about, what are the possible variables that could affect the deal, and do those ahead of time. Because when you get into the deal, it's emotion. As much as we don't want to talk about it, emotion does take over, and it's a big part of this.
Let's talk emotion for a second because I am a big fan of liquidity in certain parts of my buckets and illiquidity in others. And I'll give you an example. In 2020, March of 2020, I watched my equity portfolio drop 40%. I had no idea what was going on with my real estate portfolio because no one in the world knew what was going on with real estate because there's no bid ask going on right then.
Right.
That alone saved me from selling some of my real estate properties because no one was ever going to leave their house again, and no one was going to pay rent, and everybody lost their jobs and all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And it turns out like 4 years, 5 years from looking back on it, those have been some of the best assets I've ever held because of that. So how do you think about liquidity in your investment DNA and investment portfolio?
And just so I'm clear on this, you're saying like how much do I keep on hand at any time, or the things that I invest in having the ability to be liquid easily or something like that?
The latter. So there's the great clarification. So there's two parts of this conversation, right? There's like savings and where can I access cash in case of an emergency. We're not talking about that piece. We're talking
Okay.
about just investments. Because I'll give you another example. Like I don't think there have been plenty of people that have made millions and billions of dollars developing real estate. But when you develop real estate, you say, I'm going to buy something for this price and somebody's going to pay more for it later. If
Right.
I'm going to speculate on something like that, then I'm going to speculate on Nvidia's earnings, on Bitcoin, and what's going to happen with the new administration, or something that I know I can get out of if the market starts to turn. If you're in a development and your market turns on you, you're 2.5 years from ever seeing what the end result is going to be.
Right.
Hey, fellow investors, before we dive into our next segment of the show, I wanted to take a quick moment to talk to you about a fantastic opportunity for you to invest with me. As you know, here at Ice Cream with Investors, I'm passionate about real estate investing and helping you navigate the exciting world of wealth creation through real estate. And that's why, for the first time, I'm thrilled to tell you about an opportunity for you to invest alongside of me. Over the past 3 years, I've been investing in multifamily, mobile home parks, car washes. I've even become the bank and lent out money to fellow real estate investors on a short-term basis. And now you can come join me. If you would like to jump on a call and learn more about this opportunity, head to icecreamwithinvestors.com/invest and find a time for us to connect. And now back to the show.
Yeah, I would be even more skeptical of speculation than probably even what you're saying. Because everything that I want to be involved in produces a cash flow super fast. That to me is like I'm trading my liquidity for immediate returns. Like I
Yep.
want to start seeing that money come in because again, to me, it's less about this may sound a little bit counterintuitive. It's less about the overall ROI for me, and it's more about how is it helping me to keep score to my ultimate goal. If it's continuously pushing that passive income up every month, and I can manage my monthly expenses and keep them about the same or even reduce them over time, I know I'm getting closer and closer to my end goal. Whereas if I'm speculating on any of these other things, the only ones that I want to speculate on are the deals that I already know that are producing cash flow as well. So, for instance, like, and it's less even about speculation, it's about following the business plan when you talk about multifamily or any of these kind of mobile home parks or things that have immediate cash flow, but they also have an upside associated with them. I never even really bank on the upside, if that makes sense. I'm like, I hope that works out. That'd be great. And I'll be able to just maybe use some of that money to double up on some of these other things. But the cash flow to me is where you win or lose the game. And I want to win.
Yeah, it almost does one of two purposes. It either reduces your cost basis in an investment, so it de-risks it, or it helps you divert that money coming back to you towards paying bills, paying down your mortgage, whatever that might look like. By the way, if you have 5 girls and you find a way to reduce costs as they get older, that right there is the next ebook you should write because with 2 ones over here, it seems like that's getting a little bit higher every single hour that we have them.
Well, I'll tell you this one cool way that we have, I'm not saying we've got this figured out by any means, but one of the cool things that we've done is my oldest is 18, my second is 16. And from the time they were probably 14 and 12 or 15 and 13, somewhere in there, I just started exposing them to a lot of the things that I was learning, taking them on conferences, um, getting them around other people like yourself, and showing them these different types of asset classes. We went through their investor DNA personally, and we started to really look at what's out there. And my 18-year-old started her own land flipping business when she was 15, um,
Awesome.
to the point where now she's 18. She graduated from high school, and she's like, Dad, I don't really think I want to go to college because I've already been building this business. Why don't I just ramp that up, and I can live at home, I can save that money, and I can continue to build something that, one day may be an asset for my family, like down the road. And I was so excited to hear that that's how she was thinking about her world, her life, and her skills that she had been able to build over that time. And it didn't necessarily save a lot of money per se, but it definitely has helped to launch her, into her own passive income journey, and so that's really exciting to me.
Yeah, Joey's number one tip there: get your kids involved in building a business so that they don't go to college instead. That's a great money saving tip right there. No, I want to commend you on that because I think our kids are 8 and 6, 6 and 8. So when the time comes for them to go to college, it's really going to be a world of show me what you've done, show me what you've built. Like the internet and AI is so free and abundant that if you don't have something that's not I interned with my dad or my dad's best friend at his company, but no, I went out and built this application. Sure, it failed, but I built this, or something like that. Then that's going to be the differentiator, I feel like. And I would take a bet on someone like your daughter who's like, hey, I've struggled along the way, but I built this business, versus a fancy degree, especially if it's from the University of Alabama, because they're just, it's no University of Tennessee.
Hey, you can pick that fight all you want. I really don't care about football at all, but I know the hatred runs deep, both ways, on that deal.
The last piece I kind of want to talk about is I think this investor DNA is key. Understanding where you're going, building a plan out, having the support community, which we haven't really talked about too much, but is this idea of risk management. So when we're investing, there are things like stocks that are liquid where we can kind of pull out when we feel like we're not in a good position. And then there are things that are illiquid, like a development deal or a syndication or something like that. So I guess, how do you help your students, and how do you ultimately think about risk management as you're doing some of these investments?
Great question. I think it really boils down to a couple of things. Spending more time on the front end. If you've built enough of a due diligence process, you're de-risking what that money's going to go do for you. And like in our mastermind, for instance, we've had due diligence workshops. We've had people build out, entire due diligence checklists and continue to refine that buy box. There's still no way to be perfect in this. It's not like a pass fail. To me, it's an always learning, always. I mean, in fact, we were interviewing a guy on our podcast today that's been a professional investor in the private lending space for years and years. And he just told us the deal. He invested in a deal in rural Georgia that ended up being a complete disaster. And he essentially had to write it off as a charitable donation at the end of the story. And you're like, well, how does that happen? Well, he talked about the very many things that he's now built into his due diligence checklist that he'll never do again. So I don't think it's possible to 100% de-risk investing in the broader landscape of alternative investing. But I think the more you know about yourself, the more you know about the end operator, right? Not just the people who are raising money towards that deal, but the actual operator, the track record, the project, the business plan. We could go on and on and on about all the various aspects that you need to be a good steward of, knowing those things. That de-risks it. The second thing I would say is, a lot of people just want to go really wide with the things that they invest in. And Russ and I have done that mostly because we get introduced to so many things and we're like, hey, we want to tell the world, is this something that's working or not? So that it just gives people more of a vision of what's possible, exposes them to, not just all the good things about an investment asset class, but maybe some things that they wouldn't have learned. Like we want them to learn on our dime, so to speak. But I would say it's not typically advisable that you go super wide and what the world says is diversify. Most people have made the vast majority of their money in one area and then they start to diversify. And so I would say buckle down into your zone of genius first and then start to look at things that line up with your investor DNA. And you may only need one or two to really, spread that out in that from a risk standpoint, versus having to go super, super wide. I don't know if that completely answers your question, but that's kind of how I think about it. And I think how our community would respond.
Yeah, I'm almost hearing two parts of this conversation. One is like get so knowledgeable about something that you don't feel the need to diversify because you have so much knowledge of it. I was listening to this talk on the plane the other day, and this guy was talking about most people think they're diversified when they buy Nvidia and Apple. Well, yes, you have two different stocks, but they pretty much are in the same industry selling very similar products. And if one gets hit, the other's going to get hit as well. What he is more interested in is diversification across uncorrelated assets and knowing that it's uncorrelated. So, multifamily and mobile home parks, by its very nature, aren't even uncorrelated. They're still housing in America. And if you want to get specific, like housing in Southeast is not necessarily diversified. So, I also think the second piece that I would love to hear your opinion on is I think over the past 4 years, I've also tried to take a different approach to the way I underwrite deals in a way that says all investments are risky. Even buying US government debt right now seems to be a risky asset on the ability to pay it back. And that's supposed to be the most guaranteed asset that you can buy in the world. Um, so what if I take this approach of I know that at least 2 out of 10 deals are not going to go the way that I want them to go. In fact, they may even go to zero. What would I need to earn on the other 8 to make up for the fact that I lost money on those 2? And that I have found that mindset shift has made me more disciplined about where I'm willing to deploy capital and makes me more risk on when I say yes to something, meaning I'm going further in on that deal versus a standard 25, 50K check kind of thing. So
Right.
I would love to kind of hear your response to that, because I certainly don't want people to think that every time they invest, they might lose their money. But all investing is risky. There's a good chance you're going to invest in something that's a loser at some point in your career.
Yeah. I've actually, heard this from guys that this is more in the angel world, like the angel investing world, is that they always want to invest in 10 plus,
Hmm.
because they know that, one or two will actually be a winner and the other 8 will just, fall by the wayside. And they're there for the one or two because it's just the multiple on that success is dramatically more than, what they would have done in one of these other verticals, let's say. For me, I think, again, I'm a simple minded guy, man. At the end of the day, I want to keep things as simple as possible. And I think if in the alternative investing space, it is possible to be a 2 out of 10 kind of deal. Like you can end up in that. What I would find is that most people that do that, they're going to actually give up on it altogether because they're going to think, well, I'm leaving Wall Street because I don't like this idea of this uncertainty and the volatility and dropping to, like you said, in 2020, 40% of your portfolio going down. You're like, how did I keep that from ever happening again? Like that's a really bad place to be and to feel. Um, and so, like, let me do this alternative investing thing. And then they realize that there's actually quite a bit of scamming going on in that world. I mean, you hear of Ponzi schemes multiple times a year, and you only hear probably 1% of them. There's a lot that goes on. And so the way that I think about it is this: you have to become a better investor. Like, if you are not willing to become a better investor, then your best option is to leave money with somebody else who is willing to do it. And they better, care more than, your typical financial advisor. Because at the end of the day, those jokers get paid a percentage of whatever your portfolio is, if it goes up 60% or down 40%. And if you're not willing to do the work, and this is where, in my faith, I would see it as a stewardship issue, that like God has given me resources. I am called to steward those to the best of my ability. And if I'm not willing to go through the process of due diligence, of learning from other investors, of being a part of reading books and like researching things and understanding how to underwrite deals, then I don't need to be playing in that space either. Right. So, but you also can't expect to steward it well if you're not the one that's taking charge. I think of it like this: if I said the same thing that people say about money with my kids, you would be like, that is the most irresponsible thing I've ever heard. Right. Well, I don't really understand this whole like raising kids thing. So I'm just going to let somebody else do it. And, hopefully it all works out in the end. It's like, you're an idiot, right? Of course, you're going to buckle down. You're going to go through something. It's going to be difficult. Like there's no like manual somewhere, but I'm going to literally buckle down and I'm going to learn what it means to be a husband, what it means to be a father, because it's so worth it. Well, your finances are no different. You just have to figure out how to lean in that space. Where are the resources, where are the communities, where are the people that have already been there, done that are having success. And then you got to figure it out. Right. And so I don't know if I went on a tangent or not, but I just take that really seriously, that we can't expect to see all the winners when we haven't done the job of becoming a better investor.
That's right. And I think at the end of the day, look, I didn't make the rules of the world, but you do need money to live in this world. I didn't make that rule, but I certainly have to follow by it. So my whole thing, when people say, oh, you're just interested in this, you like this kind of stuff, I don't like this, all that sort of thing. It's like, well, you have to do this anyways. So you might as well go learn about it. And if you do want to turn it over to someone else, you better hope that they care about your money more than you do, because at the end of the day, I've found no one that cares about their money more than they do. But
exactly,
yeah, we can go on a whole tangent about that. But Joey, I want to get us to our last round. I call this the 4 toppings. Our first one is, what is your favorite book, or what is a book you've read recently that's given you a paradigm shift?
Oh man, there's so many good ones. I'll say this recent one, read Alex Hormozi's $100 million leads, was a great way to just think about building an operating business. And I think there's a lot of good takeaways there. The book that had the biggest impact on me was Become Your Own Banker by Nelson Nash. Like, had I not read that in 2009, I definitely would not be talking to you today. I wouldn't have had my children learning about passive income, because I wouldn't have known the first thing about it. I would have been just kind of in the zone of everybody else, in the default of retirement and saving long-term and not having control of my finances.
And the best thing is, if our listeners haven't read the book, they can definitely go to listen to Nelson Nash talk, because that, my friend, is the best accent I have ever heard in my life.
That's right.
Our second one is, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Man, there's a lot we could point to. One of the things that I think has served me really well over the years is something I learned in college. It's crazy. This guy at a college ministry I was involved with, we were down at the beach, and I was put into like a leadership role, but then I had a leader that was kind of discipling me, if you will. It's a great ministry, Campus Outreach. If you've never heard them, I'm really a big fan of what they do. But he sat me down. And he was like, man, listen, leadership is knowing what only you can do and making sure that all the other things are done by the people who can do those well. And to me, that was super freeing, because I don't pretend to be gifted in all these different areas, but running organizations, running your household, running your finances, running whatever it is requires leadership. And if you think that it's always about you and what you can do, you're going to be super limited. But the more to the extent that you can delegate to people who are much better at things and more equipped to do those things, and or more focused on one particular aspect of a business or otherwise, you will have exponential results in really all areas of your life.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. I don't know what to add to that. So our third one is, what are you most proud of in your life?
Man, I think I'm most proud of just my family. Like I said, having 5 girls, I never would have thought that was like my calling in life. But I love being a girl dad and pouring into them. And they really have been my why for a long time, that drove me to say, you know, we have such limited time to impact them and invest in them and ultimately disciple them in the way that they should go. And I don't want to leave that up to somebody else. And so I had to put my finances around that to support that vision and that goal. And as of today, I'm just really grateful that the Lord kind of has had me on this path, and that, like I said, we have the relationship that we have, that, my kids look forward to spending time with me, even though it's not cool when you're 16 and 18, but they still look forward to that. And so that's really important to me.
Yeah, that piece on time hits home hard. I'm sure you've seen that meme graph going around the internet, like you're going to spend half of the time you'll ever spend with your child before the age of 10 kind of thing.
Yeah.
And, I was doing some math on running numbers and calculations and where I want to be in 10 years and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, oh, shoot, like 10 plus 8 is 18. Like he'll be going out of the house at that point. That feels like it's so close, but yeah, when you put it in perspective like that, I guess it really is close.
Super close. Absolutely.
Our fourth and final one is, if you could sit down and eat a bowl of ice cream with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Man, that's a great question. I'm a big fan of just some of the leaders from the Bible. I feel like Paul, for instance, was one of those guys that, as you read his different letters, he's super wise, super humble, and he also was like a terrible person at one point. Like he was killing Christians and thought he was doing the right things and living the way he was supposed to. But man, just to see the way in which he was transformed by Jesus, and like that's just the way that I try to live every day. And he would be a super interesting guy to sit down with and just learn from. So yeah, you kind of caught me off guard with that, but that would be that would definitely be time well spent.
I think one thing I'm hearing there is you're one encounter, one decision away from being an apostle.
Absolutely. That's great.
Well, Joey, fantastic having you on. If our listeners wanted to reach out to you, learn more about what you've got going on with Wealth Without Wall Street, where is the best place we could point them?
Well, for your specific show, we set up a page. If you go to wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/ice cream with investors, you can actually download a lot of these free resources that we talked about. The Investor DNA is embedded in our passive income operating system ebook. It's by far the best resources we've ever created. You can even talk to one of our coaches if you want to go deeper on how to build that out for yourself. But man, just that's the best place to get me. It'll take you to our community and I love to hear that you listen to the show here with Matt today.
Awesome. We will leave those in the show notes. And then Joe, thanks for coming on.
Always a pleasure, my friend. Good to be with you.
Thank you for listening to Ice Cream with Investors. If you like what we serve you here, it would mean the world to me if you would like, subscribe, and leave a review on your favorite podcast app.